Hello, everybody. My name is Manuel, and it's yet another podcast from Hidalgo, together with Rachel Wright. And the topic of today will be Jira Cloud migration. Just for the idea, this podcast is not scripted in any way. We did not prepare with a whole bunch of scripted questions. And it's a spontaneous way of doing a podcast. And Rachel, welcome. Could you just shortly and briefly introduce yourself? Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me. I'm Rachel Wright. I'm a certified Jira Administrator and author of the Jira Strategy Admin Workbook. And as a consultant, I've seen a lot of different Jira configurations and environments and ways people have set up their application. And that's going to be a challenge for some people with their migration. So today, hopefully, we can answer some questions about what to do and how migration works and how to make good decisions.
Yeah. Before any migration starts, you would think, you need to know the situation as is. So probably you need to start with a kind of an assessment. How does that work?
Absolutely. So if you look at how long it might take for your migration, it's going to be different for everyone. But I would say spend 25% of the time you spend on your migration project just auditing what you have, understanding your configuration, what apps do you have installed, how much data do you need to migrate, or do you even really need to migrate all the data? So upfront planning is going to be the key to your success.
Yeah, including the same questions probably, do you really still need all those add-ons? Because in many cases, add-ons were requested by somebody's team and they don't use it anymore after a certain amount of time. And add-ons are like, I wouldn't say without work at that point, they are not used anymore. Workflows that are not used anymore, projects that have been stopped for ages but are still not archived, and so on and so on. So there is really a lot of work on that point. And probably 25% to do the assessment, and I think about 50% of the rest to discuss what should be migrated or not, because within a company and different departments, everybody will have a different view. So it comes in a positive way, the politics on what will we conserve.
Absolutely. I think the most important parts of your migration aren't actually doing the migration, it's planning for it and then testing it after. And if you spend most of your time doing those two things, your migration will be way more successful than if you just say, try it over some weekend.
Yeah, exactly. And for those people who think that it's a migration to the cloud is a push of a button after you had your planning done and everything, like some marketing tools might think it's so easy, it is not. Because one of those things in the assessment that should come up is you have add-ons, okay, and they're used, yes, okay, but if they are used in the server, are they still available in the cloud? And if they are available in the cloud, will they have the same functionality in the cloud that you require? So it can go quite far.
And additionally, how do you migrate that data? Is there a migration tool available for each app you have? Or are you going to have to do something custom? Are you going to need to work with the vendor? Are you going to need to use another app that can integrate with that data and move it? There's a lot of considerations, and you've got to look at each app individually and make decisions.
Yeah. Yeah. As an anecdote, probably the app that needs most attention is people that use Tempo timesheets and wish to migrate fully with all the data and also the historical data. That is something that doesn't take 2 minutes, because there is no migration tool as such that is standard for it. In our case, we have written a full script to migrate and to automate the maximum of it. And let's say we have done the assessment and everything is prepared and we took care of the planning. And then before even we start doing any testing and a dry run to see where the data comes from or how it will be delivered, the cloud comes in 4 different flavors. Which flavor are we going to use? We have free, standard, premium, and enterprise.
Right, and they all have different features. They all have different price points, and you need to do some research to figure out what's right for your organization. We can talk about some of the differences in the plans if you'd like.
Yeah, the main topics, which are the ones that jump out of the field that you can say that is the purple cow that makes the difference between a premium and a enterprise, for example.
Sure. Well, the free version, we'll start there. Obviously, like many free versions of software out there in the world, there are some limitations. For example, the free version, you're limited to 10 users. There are no advanced permissions. So if you need to secure projects and issues, that feature doesn't exist in free. There's no audit log, and there's a 2 gig file storage limit. And the support comes from community.atlassian.com. So if you're new to Jira, or if you need a second Jira instance, the free version might be good for you. But the standard version includes more features. So you can have up to 10,000 users. You can have anonymous access, which is great if you have customers who need to log issues into your Jira application, but don't necessarily need to log in. You get much more file storage. It's 250 gigs, and you get business hour support from Atlassian. So those are the first 2 tiers. The second 2 tiers are premium and enterprise. And this is kind of where things get fun, right? Both of these, the price gets fun too, right? Absolutely. So both of these also can support 10,000 users. But premium has some advanced features like advanced roadmaps, advanced automation that lets you run automations globally or between projects, which is nice to have. It's got an archival feature for issues and projects, which actually takes the issues out of the index, which is nice. It's got the sandbox feature, so you can test your changes before you unleash them on your users, and unlimited storage.
Is the sandbox already available? Because I thought that was in the roadmap. It was to come. That's the last thing I wrote about it, but it's maybe already there.
I think it is, but I haven't played with it yet. So I'm excited to see, but everyone needs a test instance. And in the premium version, it comes with that sandbox that you can use to test things out first. So that's really exciting.
Okay. So, and at the enterprise level, it starts only at the 800 user tier. That's the minimum for the enterprise. Of course, if you have 2 people and you want an enterprise for 800, you will have a lot of slack getting extra users. But it will be a little bit expensive because it starts with 5 zeros already. So it's something to think about. At the end, the support is also different. And for Europe, it's important to mention that the enterprise is partially data resident at this moment. In the sense, if you have no add-ons running, the data residency is, you can choose between Europe and US. And the support, well, if I remember well, if you're above the 2000 user tier, you get a free TAM for 6 months.
Yep, a technical account manager from Atlassian, super helpful.
Yeah, can be helpful in the start of your project. If you're willing to pay for a TAM after that, that will be another question. So those are the flavors, and everybody really has to make a decision for them separately. Maybe important to say that the roadmap is that the part of the premium and the standard will become also data resident in the future. That's on the roadmap. So that's for our European listeners and viewers, a quite important one. And for the add-ons that redraw API data to another data center and then put it back in, they will probably migrate to the Forge platform that has been launched. So once they are adapted, we will have a mature and fully data resident Atlassian Cloud, finally, I would say. One of those, I don't know if you have anything to add on to it, but I think the most important part is if we deploy and go to the cloud, we will have our test instance. how does a dry run work? Do we dump everything right into it and see what happens, or how does that work, in fact?
Well, ideally, you've done enough research on your application that you know where the problems might arise, right? If you dump that data, you've got an idea of what challenges you might face. So that's an ideal scenario.
Sorry.
Bless you.
It's part of a podcast. It's we're not going
It's
to
real.
pick it up. It's real.
It's real, it's live, right?
It was no script, so it can happen.
Sure. But yes, definitely set up, no matter which way you're migrating, whether it's a server to server, combining instances so you can migrate to cloud, whether it's straight to cloud, whether it's to data center, definitely set up another instance where you can test your migration and be prepared to test it multiple times. A lot of times the first test does not go exactly the way you think, and you delete all that data, you make some changes to your deployment plan, and you do it again, and you do it until it's perfect, because once you do it for real, it's very hard to fix things that you don't like.
I can imagine. And above all, the questions we get a lot, let's say I go to the cloud, but I already have somewhere a data center or still a server running. Do they integrate with one another?
Well, I mean, ideally, you're going to want to merge these instances, right? I know so many companies have like an official server instance, and then there's another secondary server instance sitting underneath somebody's desk somewhere. Ideally, you want to merge these together if you're moving to cloud or data center. Do that upfront work first. The other option, of course, is to do multiple smaller migrations. For example, in some companies, like maybe the business teams are ready to move and migrate their data, but the IT team is not. You could do multiple smaller migrations. That, of course, requires more project management, more overall time, and probably more expense, but that might be the right solution. It just really depends on what data you have, your timeline, and what customizations and apps that you need to work around.
Yeah, so meaning that every company has to set their own priorities before the migration starts. For which department is it important in that case? If we talked already a little bit in the intro, so do you have some examples of functional differences between server and cloud, or other menus, or incompatibility of add-ons? Maybe you have some examples of the most important ones that come to your mind?
Well, sure. So when you talk about differences between server, data center, and cloud, one thing is you're really going to need to prepare your users if you're moving from server to cloud, because there are functional differences to know about. The UI is slightly different. Even some of the terminology is different between the two apps. The same function is named slightly different between both of them. So you'll really need to, your admins will have to prepare for those changes, and then those admins should prepare to train users on what to expect, what's different. One thing I noticed is some companies have heavily customized their server environment, and then when they get to cloud, they find that they can't do those same customizations. For example, maybe they want certain fields to appear in certain places on the page. That's not as customizable in cloud as it is in server. All sorts of functional differences. So it really makes sense to use both for a small period of time. Maybe put some of your real data into a cloud environment to see how it works. And literally, I bring up one browser in server and one browser in cloud, and I compare the UI and the functional differences, just so you know exactly what's going to change for you.
Mm-hmm. You got any examples of differences? Just like you say, there's some names differences, or
Yeah, I know in the boards in cloud, it's called estimate, whether it's a due date or a story point. It's just called estimate. In server, it's called whatever the value is. Just little tiny things like that, and it's very small. But users should be aware where things are placed are slightly different. Your user options as a cloud user are different too. So in cloud, you kind of have one Atlassian application, kind of like with Google, right? With Google or Apple, all their tools work with one username and one password. So the same is true in cloud. You have one account, which means you have account preferences, and then you have Jira preferences. And the look and feel of the user management section is totally different between server and cloud.
There is, and that's what sometimes the definition says, the devil is in the details. Huh?
Right, right.
Because those are things where nobody or very little people think about. They just think about dumping the data into another environment, case closed, it's done, but it goes way beyond that.
Right.
And while a migration to a data center is like a flick of a switch compared to it.
Right. So there's a lot to prepare for, and you don't know until you look at both side by side. Again, this isn't just a weekend project where you click a button and cross your fingers and hope everything migrates. That's not going to work for this.
Yeah. No. Any specific add-ons that we should be aware of that can cause migration issues?
I can't speak to any specifically, but I do know that they all work differently. So treat them individually, right? You can't just say all my add-ons are going to do this. They're all going to work differently. So some things you should be aware of is, one, is that add-on even compatible in the environment you're moving to? Do they even have a cloud version, for example? If they don't, check with the app vendor because they might be developing it. Server support is still going to be around for a few years. So there's a long time for add-on vendors to develop a different app that works in the other deployment method. So that's one thing to be aware of. Also, like you said earlier, a lot of companies have multiple apps that do the same thing. And sometimes they have apps that they're not using. So really look at each individually, look at the cost changes that you'll incur when you migrate, and also look for features that might be native to cloud. Look for apps that you're not using, and do know that even if the vendor has developed a cloud app, they might have functional differences as well from the server app. So again, another one-to-one comparison.
Yeah, it's really an interesting point you had there, Rachel. Yeah, so in the preparation is we talked about an assessment and so on. So and we also have, of course, to check for a checklist. Oh, that's a good one. Check for a checklist. Wow, I should become a poet. In this case, we have also the cleanup to do. What we said earlier, maybe projects to archive, unused statuses. Some customers have over 1,000 custom fields, for example, that are probably not even needed. But then some customers have 35 admins because for one or the other reason, they need to be admin to do certain things. And then everybody changes, of course, and has the power to do so. And then you get, that's a lot of work. How will we master that part?
Well, for me, the idea is to make the scope of your migration as small as possible. So scrutinize everything you have. Do you need to migrate that project that hasn't been touched in 5 years, right? Do you need that data in the new application? Or can you simply just export that data, keep it somewhere safe for legal and historical reasons, and not migrate it? That's obviously going to make an easier migration. You're right, those custom fields, clean them up, get rid of any you don't need, and really do all of this before you migrate. I see so many companies that say, you know what, we're in a rush, we got to migrate right now, and we'll do the cleanup later. And guess what happens? The cleanup never occurs. They move on to the next project right after the migration.
Yeah. You talked about in certain flavors, we have advanced automation, but so far, in fact, the most popular add-on for automation was Script Runner. So some customers might have one script, but I have some customers that have 1,500 scripts.
Sure.
How are you going to migrate that part? Because they're not compatible with the advanced automation, because that's another add-on that has been integrated into the cloud.
Right, right. Well, and I think like every other app, you've got to scrutinize how it's used, get rid of parts of it that aren't used. So are all of those 1,500 scripts still needed? Are they still running? In some cases, it's going to be a manual action of copying that script, pasting it in, or refactoring it to work in cloud. But you got to look at each app separately and create a plan for each app.
Yeah, because that only already, if a customer would have so much scripts, it's a huge work to compare every script and then see what it does, see if it's still required, and how, if it's still required, how it will work. Can it do the same thing as it did on server? And you will see in many cases might be an issue, because the interaction you have with a script on a server has much more possibilities than on a shared platform like a cloud platform would be. And script runner does exist in the cloud as well. So you might need still to transfer your scripts to and buy the add-on on the cloud. Something we had just in the beginning to mention, that we talk a lot about add-ons and add-ons. Some people watch at the prices they will pay in the cloud and say, wow, that's expensive. But okay, but then they start to see that they had a list of 25 add-ons they're using. And if you add 25 add-ons in a subscription mode to a cloud environment, the price is not going up by double or something like it. It's going to be triple, quadruple, or more, because it's the add-ons that will make the price go up. I compare it sometimes with a BMW option list. You start with a car of $20,000 or euro, and at the end you bought a car that's double the price because you had so many options, and you have double the price what you initially thought you would have. So, right. And then we come back to the fact you need to scrutinize your environment thoroughly if still all the add-ons are required, because in some cases an add-on is used, like we do use Microsoft Word or Excel. Most of the people use like 10% of the capabilities. And if that is the case and you only use 10%, maybe your Power Automation or your automation, your advanced automation in the cloud can solve the problem with a few scripts instead of having a complete add-on doing the job.
Right, right.
That's
and there are other...
Yeah, a bit anecdotic from the experience we have. Maybe you have some on it as well.
Well, I just want to mention, because a lot of people are moving to cloud from server, it's not a one-to-one comparison when you're looking at pricing, right? There are certain things that you pay for today in server that are kind of hidden costs that you don't think about that you won't have in cloud. So also be sure to factor those into your budgeting. Some examples of those are, well, you don't need a full-time database administrator for Jira because it's in the cloud and Atlassian is your database administrator. Same for a system administrator. So your resource costs could go down. You can deploy those people to manage other apps. Atlassian will be responsible for uptime, email. You won't have to have server infrastructure either in the cloud or on site or in your own data center. So it's the end price. So just think about some of those hidden costs and make sure you factor those into your analysis.
Yeah, so you get a thorough view on your return on investment in this case. Mm-hmm. Because indeed, sometimes it's purely taken into sometimes only licenses, mm-hmm. But indeed infrastructure is not cheap today as well. Certainly for those who are on AWS or Google environments or Azure, it's a quite hefty price tag. In some cases, we get the questions: do we do if we do a migration and we have done the assessment and everything, what's the best way to have the site import? Do we do a migration assistant, which the tool of Atlassian is, or do we do a database dump? That then is by scripts put all into place, or what would be the best approach?
So it depends on your unique situation, of course. But as you said, Atlassian has 3 tools to help. They have the Jira Cloud Migration Assistant, and there's pros and cons to every method, by the way. But some of the pros of that migration assistant is it can do partial data. So if you only want to move half your projects and not all of your projects and their data, it can do it. It doesn't overwrite data in your target application, which is nice. And it's got this great app assessment feature. And I really love the feature. Even if you're not going to use the cloud migration assistant to migrate your data, download it for free. Use the app assessment feature because it tells you what's compatible, what's not compatible, and provides some information about what you can do and helps you track what you're going to do with each app. So I really love that little feature. Now, the cons is it doesn't support Jira Service Management yet, although I know Atlassian is working on it. And it doesn't support all custom field types yet, but I think in the future it will. So that's one. The other, like you said, is the Jira site import. Now, it moves all data. You can't pick and choose. Also, it overwrites the data in your target instance. So this is really good for companies that have maybe smaller amounts of data, and they're going to put it all in a brand new cloud instance that doesn't have any data in it already. And then if you're moving to Jira Data Center, there's an app specifically for that configuration. You need certain parameters, however. It's for Linux, it's for PostgreSQL, and it's for AWS specifically. So if those three things apply to you, you can use that data center migration tool. After that, there are apps in the Atlassian Marketplace that can help you with your migration. And then from there, there's the CSV, import-export functionality. There's writing your own scripts, and there's doing database dumps. My personal opinion is if you can use a tool, it is safer and probably faster and less error prone. So that's the way I would go. But if none of the tools fit your needs, then you're right. You're going to have to craft a custom solution or work with a solution partner to help you.
Yeah, if you have a kind of a non-standard environment, a lot of customizations, the tool will not probably will not be the right choice in this case. Right. We discussed a little bit that we would come to a point that we need to start setting up a staging or a test environment. Some people say that they prefer to move to a server instance, which consolidates the cleaned up version first. And then they push it to the cloud, and then they start testing. We do get quite a lot of questions. In that case, should we do that intermediate step, or do we go directly into the cloud? And the second one would be, yeah, we are going to test, but before we test, we need to know which the limitations are, because the user interface is different, which limitations has the cloud, because if we test it, some things might not work and maybe checked as to be solved, but it can't be solved because it should be already out of it. Do we have like, should we prepare with a checklist as well in this case, and prepare how in the best way?
Absolutely. And there's a lot of good resources out there. I know you guys have your own checklist to share with customers of what you should do. I have a checklist. Atlassian has a checklist. But don't reinvent the wheel. Other people have migrated successfully and they know what steps you need to take. So go out there, do your research, grab a checklist, and then just be ready for the unexpected. You will come up with something that is not on that checklist that's going to impact your organization. So be ready, and be ready to solve problems as they arise.
Yeah, because in steps, it's the assessment, then the dry run on whichever environment you would choose. Take into account, as you said, there will always be issues in a test environment. That's just the goal of it, to discover what's going wrong in a test environment. And even so, as many things happen, sometimes you have people reading a book of 200 pages and 3 people checked it if there were no spelling mistakes into it. And at the end, you read 5 pages and you found the first spelling. That's what happens in production as well. You go to production and you think, well, we've done our testing and we've done everything. There will be, in most certain cases, always things that will pop up also in production. That's why we as a partner always foresee a kind of standby time after the project has been migrated, in case we need to tweak something or to solve a problem that has not occurred during testing, because the testing is done by the customer, because they know how their projects are working and how the workflow should be done and what's their procedures behind it and everything. But even with a good team, they might overlook a few items in this case. So just to go our viewers, it's not a perfect path. Be just prepared for it.
And you brought up a great point. Involve your testers early and often. The best admin in the world doesn't know absolutely everything going on in your applications, but your end users might, right? So have them at a minimum be involved in testing in the sandbox, and of course also testing in production. And have them look for elements they use every day. Like, how does their daily use board look? Are all the issues there? Is their dashboard there? Are they able to do the things that they do on a daily basis? You need to have your users involved in this process. It's not just like the admin team goes off in a corner, they do a migration, and then Monday morning everyone's migrated. That's not the way it should work.
Talking about that part of the end users, a testing environment for the moment is how many users are allowed in a test instance in the sandbox principle. I thought it was quite limited just to the administrator and that's it. Or do we still have, like you used to have, a test instance with maximum 5 users? What has changed in that part of the cloud on the test environment? It's not only the sandbox.
Yeah, I'm not sure, but I do know that Atlassian will give you a free cloud instance for testing your migration, and I would assume they'll work with you. And of course, you could create role accounts to use temporarily. You know, you don't want to have multiple people logging in as the same user in production. That's terrible for auditing.
Exactly.
But for testing purposes, you know, to get more eyes on the data and to make sure things look like they should, that's really helpful.
Yeah. Okay, so we're done our testing. That's a part that's done, but testing is done by maybe 5 people, 10 people, and in very big instances, maybe 20 people. But we have some customers using 15,000 users that using their Jira on a daily basis, and they will migrate. So is there a kind of a guideline to prepare the 15,000 users? Should they all have some webinar training or and a wiki onto it? So that's what we most of the time say, try to automate as much as you can, that you have your trainings in a webinar.
And also don't wait till the very end to do your training. I think the earlier you can involve your users to let them know things are changing, they might bring to light some brand new features that you didn't realize are needed or used or unused. So they can kind of be good research tools for you while you're doing your assessment.
Yeah, so we would say like 1 to 2 weeks, maybe 1 week up front, because then it stays quite fresh in the mind. Because if it's not your daily job, you know, it gets one ear in and the other ear out within very fast. I still remember when I done my exams and you would ask me all the questions the next day, I would not be capable of answering in many occasions. Maybe it's early dementia, could be, but hopefully not. In that case, so be prepared to have your users informed of the changes, like 1 week minimum upfront before you go into production. It is not done to have your users informed the day that it goes into production. Say, here is your new interface and here is your training. That's the day they need to start working on it. And if they're not aware, you might have many users that will not be so very happy. I think. I know. We talked about the after steps, after being going to production, everything is working. There is always a period where you have some issues or that still need to be solved. So I call it the post-migration support, or the after migration support, whatever you want to give the kit a name. Any specific advice on that part you would like to share?
So you've probably just done a major cleanup, right? You've gotten rid of things you don't need, custom fields, apps, old data. Now your challenge is, how do you keep it clean? How do you keep it from getting messy again with those 35 people with administrator level access? So my first thing is, I think you need a customization policy if you don't have one already. What changes are going to be made? What will we consider? We're not going to have 35 administrators again, right? We're not going to have thousands of custom fields again. And you need a policy to help you say no when somebody comes up and says, we want 10 more custom fields. So keeping it clean is the first challenge. You also, if you don't have it, you need some kind of backup and disaster recovery strategy. Sometimes customers don't have this, and it's something to think about. Obviously, you're in the cloud, it's going to back up for you, but if you've gone to data center, you still need to have a backup strategy. And just think about the things that are going to be different to users down the road. So cloud changes all the time. One day I'll be using a cloud feature and I'll log in the next day and it'll be different or enhanced. And your users, like any cloud software, will just have to get used to that kind of cadence. And they'll have to know that sometimes things are going to be a little bit different, or things are going to be in a semi-functional state as a feature is fully developed and fully rolled out. And it's just a different mindset that people need to be prepared for.
Yeah, that's a very good point, that the cloud evolves continuously. And since the cloud is mostly updated on American times, it means that we get it during production time sometimes. You can have a surprise that something might have changed. Normally, they warn up front to the administrators that something will change, so it's up to the administrators to inform the end users that there might be upcoming changes to that part, that nobody has a surprise. As I know, only in the enterprise level, you can have your changes kind of planned, which is not the case in the premium and the standard versions. Sorry, no COVID involved, just a dry cough. Just nobody will die from this podcast. That's a disclaimer will follow later on this part. So I think we touched almost the most part and the most steps on the migration to the cloud or data center. We talked very little about the data center because, in fact, it's so tiny compared to the cloud, what you have to take into account, because the server and the data center are, well, used to be identical without maybe just the configuration of the infrastructure, or that you, if you were in an AWS environment, you could have it more complex, but otherwise it's like the same identical thing. It's subscription, and the other one is perpetual. That's, I would say, the most important difference, except that you can install it multi-node if you want. You don't have to. If I would come to a conclusion, maybe you have one, but I would say do not underestimate, and please follow all those steps for a thorough migration. It will take quite some time to prepare. There's no reason to hurry. Your servers are end of support and not end of life, because they're perpetual licenses in 2024, but also not start in 2024 to do a migration, because the I think the versions need to be as high as possible in your server environment to be able to have a fluent migration to your cloud environment. Do you have any specific thoughts on that part, Rachel?
People may need to upgrade. Yeah, absolutely. Some customers might need to upgrade server now just so they can migrate. So don't wait. Start your process now. Start the analysis process so you know what you're dealing with. And if you take nothing else away from this, just know that it's not a one-click process, and it's not a quick process. It's going to take time and energy and dedicated project management, like any other strategic company priority. Put this high on the top of your list and give it the attention it deserves.
Yeah. In this case, I have an anecdote. We have customers working on Jira 6.4. That's 7 years or 8 years old. Never paid any maintenance. So, and there is no server available anymore, and they didn't buy any, although we warned them. So probably they will continue until 2030 or something like it, and then move in a big bang to another tool. I really would like to end this part, and for viewers and or our listeners, I would announce that we have also a Jira Cloud workflows workshop on the 17th of February. The link will be in the description of this podcast, and please follow our workshops. They're free. And you can, they're not full of publicity, they're just straightforward information about the topics that are mentioned. And you can follow, if you search in Eventbrite on Hidalgo, you will see all the workshops that we have. Thank you very much, Rachel, for this second podcast we had with you so far. And as usual, it was an honor again to have a discussion with you. And we hope to have more with them on other topics in a later stage.
Thank you for having me.
It's our pleasure. Thank you.